Okay, we're on a roll here with these inequalities. So let's keep going. Here's the next section. The I can statement for 9.5 is I can solve multi-step inequalities. And starting off with a familiar question, hopefully you know the answer by now. How do we solve inequalities? So you can see down below I've got some examples of some inequalities that are quite a bit more complicated than what we've seen. But that really shouldn't be scary because we know how to solve equations, and the answer to this question involves the idea of solving equations. So how do we solve inequalities? You've got to know this. You've got to be able to recite this. I might ask this as a bonus question on a test or something like that. So how do we solve inequalities? So we're going to write we solve inequalities just like we solve equations. Just like we solve equations. Except, so there's this exception to it, except when we multiply or divide by a negative. It's only when we multiply or divide by a negative, then we do something different. Then we switch the direction. So switch the direction of the inequality. Okay, so you've got to have that in mind as we're going through and solving these. So the only thing that changes the direction of the inequality, the only time we do something different than when we solve an equation, is if we multiply or divide by a negative. And the only thing we have to do is switch the direction of the inequality. So everything like adding, subtracting, simplifying, distributing, collecting like terms, any of those things are totally okay. They do not change the direction of the inequality. It's only when we are taking the step of multiplying or dividing both sides by a negative, or dividing both sides by a negative, that we have to switch the direction. So let's go through and solve some of these. You'll notice this is way more complicated. We've got decimal numbers, we've got some distributing, we're going to have some collecting like terms and stuff like that. But all we have to do is think, well, I just solved this like I would an equation. So let's treat this like an equation, and notice that the first thing we're going to do is we're going to distribute. Now we're distributing through a -7. We're going to be multiplying by a -7. Does that change the direction of the inequalities? We'll stop and think for just a second. Are we multiplying or dividing both sides by that same number? And the answer to that is no. All we're doing is we're doing some simplification here. Simplifying does not change the direction of the inequality. So let's go ahead and multiply here, and I'm going to grab the calculator for some help. Let's make sure that we get this right. So here we go. Let's see, -7 times 1.5. We end up with -10.5. So I'm just going to write this 80.9. Again, I'm going to leave that a greater than for the time being. So this is -10.5 m. Then I'm multiplying the two of these together. I think I know what the answer is, but let's just double check and make sure. -7 times -0.7. Don't forget that negative there. It is going to work out to be positive, and stop and think, what's 7 times 7? Shouldn't be a surprise that we get 4.9. So this is 4.9 here. And then we have -5.5 m. Okay, all we did there was distribute. We didn't do the same thing to both sides, so we're in good shape here. We didn't multiply both sides by a negative, so we've got that 10.5. These are now like terms. Let's just combine those together. Let's put those together. So if we have -10.5 m and -5.5 m, that's going to be -16 m. So we get 80.9. This is going to be -16 m. Turns out to be a whole number here, and then this is 44.9. Okay, so let's keep going here. Let's move this to the other side by subtracting 4.9. Now I'm hoping you know what this is, but let's just double check and make sure. I think that's 76. So let's see what we get here when we do some subtraction. 80.9 minus 4.9. Yep, 76, so we're in good shape. So 76 here, whoops, 76 here. Again, all we were doing is subtracting, so we don't change the direction. Then we've got a negative 16m. Okay, let's see. We are going to divide by negative 16. And let's see, I get an m on this side. Now we're dividing by a negative, so let's switch the direction of the inequality. And then that does not go in evenly. Let's just double check here and see. 76, whoops, 76 divided by negative 16. It's not going to go in evenly, but it is going to reduce fairly nicely. So let's do this. 2 goes into both of those, so let's see, we get, let's see, an 8 on the bottom here. And let's just put the negative out front. And then this would be 38. And then let's see, 2 goes into both of those, so this would be a 4 on the bottom and a 19. Yeah, so negative 19 over 4. And again, just to double check, you can always do something like this on your calculator. Let's do negative 19 divided by 4 and get negative 4.75. Okay, so oh, and this was about a decimal, so hey, we can just go ahead and write that down, can't we? Negative 4.75. So negative 4.75. So good little exercise here, but since the original problem had decimals in it, let's go ahead and write the answer as a decimal. So there's the answer. We're going to put 0 right here. I'm going to put negative 5 here and negative 4 here. We're going to circle negative 4.75. We're going to label that negative 4.75. And then we're not going to shade it in, we're not going to fill it in, but the answers are greater than negative 4.75, so the answers are over here. Alright, so that's what the answer looks like. You'll notice on the next one, on B, it says do not graph, so that's kind of good news. Let's go ahead and distribute here. Gosh, some ugly numbers here, but let's see how we can deal with this. Let's see, this is going to be 7.6. And then this is going to be negative, and let's see what 7.6 times 4.02 is. I've got that typed there the right way, so that's 30.552. So 30.552, and we've got a k on that, and that's greater than or equal to negative 15.314. Now just to double check, I always like to have that calculator on the screen. Positive, negative, yep, good there. Okay, so again, we distributed through. That doesn't change the direction of the inequality. Even if that had been a negative 7.6, we'd be okay here. So we are going to subtract 7.6. So we get negative 30.552k. Subtracting doesn't change the direction. So let's see what we've got here. Negative 15.314 minus 7.6. Whoops, gotta have that 7 in there. 7.6. Okay, I've got that typed in there the right way. We get 22.914, negative 22.914, which looks like a pretty reasonable estimate there. Okay, and then we're going to divide both sides by negative 30.552. Now gosh, I hope you don't have many of these on your assignment that are this ugly, but let's go ahead and get rid of that. Doesn't matter how ugly it is, we're just thinking, okay, did we multiply or divide by a negative? We did on this one, so we need to switch the direction. And then, gosh, I'm hoping this works out nicely. Let's take that answer and let's divide it by negative 30.552. Let's see what we get here. Holy cow, 0.75. So after all that, we get this nice answer of 0.75. And again, it says do not graph, so we're not going to bother graphing that. Let's take a look at C. We do want to graph this one. Let's see, we're going to distribute. We're distributing through a negative. Change the direction? Nope, because all we're doing is a form of simplification. We're not multiplying both sides by a negative 3. So this is going to be negative 27r. This is going to be minus 9. Negative 7r. Keep the direction the same. Negative 10r. Distribute the negative through. Negative 2r. Minus 9. Again, all we were doing is simplifying each side and distributing through. not doing the same thing to both sides. So let's see, what do we get when we put these together? We get negative 34r minus 9. Again, all we're doing is simplifying, so I'm going to keep them the same direction. Negative 12r minus 9. I'm going to move the smallest one, so I'm going to move this one over there. So I'm going to add 34r. Add 34r. Now, since we're moving these over on that side, let's move this one over there. So we're going to add 9 here and add 9 there. So let's see what we get here. And again, did a bunch of simplification, did some adding and subtracting. In this case, just all adding, so that doesn't change the direction. We end up with a 0 right here. Don't freak out. We did everything right, so there's nothing wrong with a 0 there. And then right here, we're going to get a 22r. So we're going to divide both sides by 22 and then stop and think, is it okay to take a 0 and divide it by 22? Totally okay. So we get a 0 on this side and we get an r on that side. So there's the answer. So read from the variable, r is less than or equal to 0. So here's 0 not only as our reference point but as our answer. So there's 0. We are going to fill it in, and then we're going to read from the variable. So the answers are less than or equal to 0. So less than or equal to 0. Anything over there would be just fine. Now, again, what that means is any of the numbers that are shaded in, including 0, any of these numbers, so 0, negative 5, negative 2.1, negative 0.5, anything like that, negative 4 billion, any of those numbers, if we plugged them in, it would make the inequality true. Anything on this side, anything that's positive, wouldn't make that inequality true. It would make it false. Okay, we've done several problems here, and I don't think you have anything quite as ugly on your assignment, but even if you did, it should give us some sense of relief that, hey, if we just go through and if we know how to solve equations, we just do these exactly the same way. So we do some simplifying, collecting like terms, distributing, all that sort of stuff. And then we use our equation solving techniques. And the only time we have to switch the direction of the inequalities if we multiply or divide by a negative.